Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Crimson and in this video we are going to be starting our look through of the Sekiro Shadows Die Twice official artworks book. So Sekiro is one of my favorite FromSoft games. Bloodborne is my favorite game overall. However, in terms of actual gameplay, I prefer Sekiro, just based on its combat. And it's not just my favorite FromSoft game in terms of combat, it is one of my favorite games, period, in terms of combat. Now, the first video that I actually ever uploaded to my channel was the Sekiro mini art book. That book came with the collector's edition of Sekiro. It also came with a little statue of Wolf. I don't have him now, but I will bring him down for the next part, and hopefully, depending on when this goes up, I will have my Sekiro Nendoroid as well as my Genichiro Nendoroid, which I will show you guys. Whereas this book is a standalone book. So I'm very glad I got this. It's one of my favorite books that I have. What is actually cool about it is based on this being a Japanese book, and because it is because Sekiro is a Japanese game, it is situated in the Japanese reading format. So if you're familiar with reading manga, we are starting at the back of the book for us Westerners, but this is the front of the book. So there's not that much text in this book. It's mainly just pictures, but that's fine because the pictures are excellent. I have played through Sekiro. I actually think I've played through Sekiro more times than I've played through Bloodborne, just because I wanted to get all the endings and then do challenge runs and hit runs and stuff like that. And I actually played Sekiro on mouse and keyboard because I didn't have a controller at the time for PC. And then when I went back and tried to play it on controller, I found I could not play it. So I have only ever played Sekiro on mouse and keyboard, which is a first for me for FromSoft games. So with that out of the way, let's get into it, and I apologize if you hear my cat in the background. So, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice official artworks. So with the sleeve removed, we have a black and white cover of, again, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice official artworks in red text, as well as a black and white picture of Wolf kneeling to Lord Kuro. So let's dive straight into it. So this is again the picture that is on the sleeve of the book. Now, this art book is almost entirely environmental pictures. However, near the end of the book is where we have our concept art. So I thought that, I know it's a little bit out of order, but we should start with the concept art. So we are going to go ahead and start from here. So let's just get started. So starting us off, sorry, let me hold the page to so you add the glare isn't here. We start off with Lord Ishin Ashina, who is the leader of the Ashina clan. He is also known as the Sword Saint. His martial prowess alone is what has made the region of Ashina independent from the rest of Japan. He is one of the most skilled sword fighters to essentially ever live in the world of Sekiro. And This is him during his, not necessarily youth, he is still fairly old, but this is him in his prime. You can see him here. He is in his battle gear and he is all bloody and covered in ash and muck and blood and everything. But yeah, very, very intimidating man and not someone to be taken lightly. He is missing his left eye due to a battle and he has a massive scar on it. He is alone the reason why Ashina is in the state that it is in terms of its independence. And fun fact, the Ashina clan were an actual real clan in feudal Japan. Now, I don't think they were as independent or as strong as they are depicted in Sekiro, and I don't think Lord Ishin actually existed, but it is kind of cool how they did actually incorporate a real world clan. Now, here we have a picture, two pictures actually. So in the beginning cutscene of the game, we see a massive battle unfurl, and this is where Wolf becomes a shinobi or meets Shinobi Master Owl. But we also have another cinematic of Ishin fighting another general. I'm assuming this general is from the Interior Ministry. And this general is massive. He has a huge spear, whereas Ishin is simply just wielding a standard katana. And despite his size, despite how strong he is, despite his weapon's reach, Ishin easily wins. He blocks an attack and then stabs him in the foot, and then as he kneels down, Ishin climbs on his back and shoves his sword into his neck. So this is what essentially, or this event is what gained Ashina its independence. So I'm assuming what had happened was the Interior Ministry and Ashina set up an agreement where they would each send one champion, and whoever wins the duel wins the war. And as it turns out, Ishin wins, so that's why Ashina is independent. Here we see the weapons that Ishin is using. So he just has a standard katana and a standard tanto. I actually have both a katana and a tanto that were hand forged in Japan in the traditional style. That cost a lot and a lot of money, but they are so well worth it. So I might show them when this video series is at the end, but I'm not sure. I don't know how YouTube feels with showing weapons. Whereas here we find the other general, and this is his size, this is his spear. As you can see, it has a massive cross guard and a kind of leaf-shaped bit on top of it. And as big as this general is, you can see that his spear is even taller than he is. So moving on from Lord Ishin, we have some of the Ashina soldiers. So these are some of the early and mid-game standard enemy types that we find. We have the more light armored samurai, as well as the more heavily armored samurai. These guys are obviously much more elite compared to these guys. Not going to spend too much time on them since they're essentially just your standard enemy type for this game. What is cool is you can see that they have the different types of faces that these enemies have, which is cool. I always like when games add different faces and features to standard enemies, because it's very it's very easy to feel like, you know, you're just killing and fighting the same two guys over and over again for 15 hours. Next up, we have the Great Shinobi Owl. So, Owl is the shinobi who finds Wolf on the battlefield and brings him in and raises him as his own and teaches him the Iron Code. However, during the assault on the Hinata estate, Owl not only fakes his own death, not only is responsible for the bandits attacking the castle, but also is the one who stabs Wolf in the back after Wolf defeats Lady Butterfly, and he believes that Wolf is dead. Keep in mind, Wolf is essentially his adopted son. But because Kuro saw the lengths and the bravery that Wolf went through to keep him safe, Kuro decides to give him his blood, thus making him part of the dragon's heritage and immortal. Down here we have young Wolf. So this is Wolf as a child, and this is the age in which Owl finds and adopts him. So at this point, Wolf is not a shinobi. Wolf is an orphan who is a battlefield scavenger, which was a common practice in feudal Japan, where people would go into battlefields and loot corpses for valuables, for weapons, for armor, and stuff that they could either use, keep, or sell. So, since Owl finds him, he brings him under his wing, no pun intended, and he becomes a shinobi. Next up, we have adult Wolf. As we see here, he is much older and much more different than young Wolf. So he has the same scarf that we saw young Wolf has. He also wears a similar orange clothing piece of attire. Very, very cool. This picture here has Wolf with the immortal blade on his back, as well as his sword. His sword, as you can see here, is called the Kasubimaru. I believe that's it. I apologize if I mispronounced that, but it is the sword given to him by Kuro. So Wolf treasures it more than his own life. This is the mortal blade here that Wolf finds about halfway through the game and is very integral story-wise. But yeah, these pictures of Wolf are very good. Wolf is also known as Sekiro. This is a name that Ichin gives him. So Wolf and Sekiro are essentially synonymous. So he is either Wolf or Sekiro. Both names apply. I'm pretty sure that it is only Ishin that calls him Sekiro, but I could be mistaken. It's been about 4 months since I last played Sekiro, so I'm a little bit rusty on the knowledge. I So this is what he looks like. He is an old man missing his arm. Very bitter old man. He carves the Buddhas, as he says, to keep his demons at bay. And he says that no matter how much he tries, his Buddhas always appear demonic. So he was the original owner of the Shinobi prosthetic, yet he gives it to Wolf. We have another picture of him here. This is more of a picture of his body. So you can see it's very old, very worn down, and yeah, this is a picture of him from behind. Okay, on our left here is a man named Hanbei. Now, Hanbei acts as a training partner for Wolf, who is in the same area as the dilapidated temple, which is essentially this game's hub. And what is special about Hanbei is he is immortal. So, he offers his services, basically saying, hey Wolf, I can't die, so, use me as practice for all of your techniques. Hanbei isn't an essential NPC. He's kind of useful in the beginning, but as you progress through the game, he becomes less and less so. He is very useful, though, if you learn a new technique or something, but nonetheless, he is a very cool character, and I like his design. He looks like a samurai who doesn't appear old, but has the look necessarily, I don't know how to phrase it, the energy of someone who's very old. He's been alive for, I don't know how long exactly, but a very, very long time. And he is just very tired of everything. Next up, we have Lord Kuro. Lord Kuro is the divine heir of the dragon's heritage. So while Wolf is semi-immortal, as in he can die but then resurrect, Kuro is fully immortal. Okay, next page. So here is some more art of Lord Kuro. This is him in some different clothing. There's this one here, which is, I believe, in his normal clothing, but just at a different angle. I apologize, this picture is very, very dark, and even with the brightness turned up, it's hard to make out. Over here, we have 3 pictures of Kuro. This one is him just in a white robe, which I think is really cool. And here is Kuro in what looks like his traveling gear. It's been a while since I've played Sekiro, and by a while I mean about 6 to 8 months. But I actually cannot remember if this clothing is featured in the game. What is cool about it though is he looks like he actually has a weapon on him, which I do not believe he has in the game, so that's kind of interesting, both just for lore reasons and some kind of implications. Based on him being the divine heir, it makes sense that he would want to carry some kind of weapon to defend himself. But it's kind of also irrelevant, seeing as he can't even be harmed except by the immortal blade. So here is Lady Emma. So she is the daughter of a man named Dogen, and Dogen was a master inventor. He was the one who invented a lot of our shinobi prosthetic tools that we use in the game. So a very intelligent, gifted man, and his daughter Emma is a very gifted and intelligent healer. So currently in the game, She serves Lord Ishin, except she does not tell us this right at the start. She is one of the characters that we need to access multiple of the game's endings. She is also the character that we interact with to upgrade our healing gourd, both in capacity and potency. And I believe, I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. But if I am, please correct me in the comments. I believe she is the first kind of healer health upgrade NPC that we have the option of actually fighting in a From Software game, and not just in like a little gimmick boss fight or someone that we can kill, but serving as an actual boss to the game, which I think is really, really cool. And here looks like some concept art of her. She has long, kind of pale black, grayish white hair, along with having her eyes bandaged. So this is very reminiscent of the Firekeepers in Dark Souls and the Lady in Black in Demon's Souls. She looks more like your typical From Software level up / health upgrade maiden. But yeah, I think this is really, really cool. And as much as I do enjoy this art, I think the way she turned out in game is perfect. She is also the one who kind of kicks off Wolf's journey, as she drops the pamphlet into the hole that he was dropped in, and essentially at this point he had given up on life. What's interesting about this art piece down here, I don't know if you guys can see, is she kind of has the same hair markings and scars as Wolf does. Wolf has black hair, but on one side of his head he has this massive patch of white hair. And here it appears Lady Emma has the same kinds of stuff going on with her hair. This does not appear in the game. She has black hair all throughout the game. However, this is really cool, and I think it would have been cool if maybe due to the Dragon Rot status effect, which affects NPCs, that maybe if you have Emma get sick and then cure her, maybe she was ended up being scarred like this or something. I think that would have been just a really cool change to the NPC, but I think she's perfect as is. Next up is the Divine Child. So there is a lot of lore and information about her. So the monks at Senpo Temple were trying to create their own version of the diviner of the dragon's heritage by kidnapping children and essentially subjecting them to horrific experiments, of which all of the children died except for her, and she attained some form of the immortality. So she can only be harmed by the immortal blade, and I believe she is immortal, but she does not have the dragon's heritage. She has the perverted, twisted version that the Senpo monks were trying to achieve. And she is very, very traumatized for, being a young girl kidnapped and sent to a mysterious temple, and also watching all of her friends and fellow kidnap victims die in horrific ways. And she is extremely important for one of the major endings of the game. Won't go into too many spoilers for that in case you have not played it, but she plays a very important role both in the game and in that ending. I think her appearance being very similar to Kuro's is a really cool idea, just showing that despite their differences in how they achieved their immortality, they are both immortal, and having them look very similar is very cool. This one is how she appears in the ending that I was talking about in the cutscene. But yeah, let's move on. And again, I know I've mentioned this a couple of times. I do not know what this Japanese text here says. I probably should actually learn to read kanji based on how many Japanese books and Japanese art books that I have, but currently I do not, unfortunately. So here we have a few different NPCs and characters that we meet along the way. So these characters here we meet in the flashback to the attack on the Hirata estate. We have two characters here which we meet, I believe, at the start of it. I believe this lady here is actually the first woman that we talk to who kind of tells us what's going on. Here is one of the merchant NPCs. Here is another of the merchant NPCs. We find him both in the flashback and in the normal timeline. He's a very kind of greedy, disgusting man. He is very glad and happy to brag about his participation in the assault in Hirata Estate. In the Hirata Estate flashback, he is the one who tells Wolf where to find the axe prosthetic. But if you actually already found the axe prosthetic and you talk to him and he tells you that, Wolf kind of says, oh yeah, I already have that, and it completely shocks him. But very kind of out for himself, vagabond type man. Here is two characters. We meet her in the normal timeline and him in both the normal timeline and in the flashback. So this is a man named Inosuke, and this is Inosuke's mother. So we first meet Inosuke in the flashback, which he is in this state here. Sorry, I didn't know the camera was so zoomed in. I apologize. So here we can see that his eyes are completely gone and missing. This is because he tried to fight Lady Butterfly. And if you know Lady Butterfly, she uses illusion. She uses illusion techniques, which are very dangerous and can cause blindness. So him trying to fight Lady Butterfly and being defeated left him blind due to the illusions. This is Inosuke as we find him in our main timeline. Much older, but is still permanently blind. His mother, who is this woman here, is also blind, not because of any injury, but just because of old age. And when we meet her, she is the one who gives us the bell to flashback to the assault on the Hirata estate. But she also, when we first meet her, she believes we are her son, Inosuke. And then we go and we can talk to Inosuke, who is a few feet away, and essentially just asks us to take care of his mother and to make sure nothing happens to her. He is a very minor character, but I think his story is very interesting, going from this brave warrior who's not only survived the assault on the Hirata estate, but attempted to fight Lady Butterfly, just being a standard samurai. I don't believe he's a shinobi. I believe he's just a standard samurai, or at least not a very skilled shinobi, if I am correct about that. If I'm not, I apologize. Here are some of the different enemy types that we encounter throughout the game. So we have the rats. These guys serve as spies for the Interior Ministry, and they also carry out the dirty work of the Senpo Temple. So these guys are the ones behind the kidnapping of children for the monks to experiment on. Here is one of the kind of twisted medics that we find in the underground tunnels beneath Ashina, who carry out horrific experiments on people. Very, they're not the toughest enemy, but they are definitely quite scary. So here is a character that we find in the Mibu village. I believe that's where we find him. And he is asking for some of the divine water when we meet him. I believe he is the headman of the village, and he is currently hiding. Once we travel to the divine realm and gather some of the waters, we can bring it back to him, and he happily slurps it down. And then he transforms into one of the inhabitants of the divine realm, these very pale, gaunt-looking creatures with almost like fish-like appearances. I think that's intentional based on them being turned by the water. The Mibu village in and of itself is a whole story, and a very interesting story. It's very Lovecraftian, but I'm not going to go into too much info on that, just because in the other part of this video series, we will be covering the some of the different areas and locations, so I'm going to save that for when we get there. Next up is probably my favorite character in all of Sekiro, and that is Lord Genichiro Ashina. So he is the adopted grandson of Lord Ishin. Genichiro was born a peasant. However, Lord Ishin did adopt him. I believe it was due to his combat prowess and ability. He is extremely dedicated to protecting Ashina at all costs, even to the point where Lord Ishin wants to see him not succeed because he doesn't believe that protecting Ashina is worth the price that Genichiro wants to pay. So Genichiro is the man who kidnaps Lord Kuro. He wants Kuro to give him his blood so that he can become immortal and have the same abilities as Wolf does. He believes that obtaining that power is the only way for Ashina to survive the incoming invasion by the Interior Ministry. Some more information about Genichiro, and I'm not going to spend this amount of time on all of the characters. I just want to say all this about Genichiro because I love him so much. So, despite him being the villain of the game, if you watch the flashbacks and everything, and then the cutscene before the boss fight, even though he has Kuro, he never actually forces him to do anything. He just keeps asking, like, he's like, you know, Lord Kuro, can you please give me your blood? All the way through to the end. So it just kind of shows that while he is a deadly killer and all that, he's not evil. He just wants to protect his homeland, which I think is just a really nice touch. And also seeing as how Genichiro and Lord Kuro know each other. During the first boss fight at the start of the game, Genichiro says to Kuro that the last time we met was at your uncle's funeral. So these two are well acquainted. I think they actually might be cousins. That may be wrong, but if they are not blood relatives in some regard, or at least family relatives, since Genichiro isn't actually related to Lord Ishin, they're at least kind of tied in some familiar way. Over here we have some more concept art, some more art of Genichiro. So here is his bow that he uses. He has this massive bow which he uses in his boss fight, which is really, really cool. And then here are two swords. So the bottom one is the sword that Genichiro wields normally. And the second sword is the immortal blade that Genichiro attains. And it's really cool because throughout the game we were only ever told that there was one immortal blade. And then only if you pay attention to the later item descriptions do we find out that no, there's actually a second one, which is really, really cool. here is a picture of Wolf looking very, very beaten up. Again, this picture is very dark, so we see him at this stage. It looks like one of his eyes is missing in this one. And he currently has both his sword and the immortal blade. I believe this is actually one of the skins that you can unlock for Wolf in the latest and last kind of DLC that they added. So here is one of the first major bosses that we fight in the game, and if you have played the game, you already know this man's name, as he is not shy about telling it to you, but it is Gyobu Oniwa. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But yeah, it's kind of very funny. Every time you start this boss fight, even if you have failed multiple times, he enters the boss fight by screaming, "My name is..." So over here on the left, we have his horse, which he is riding. It's cool fighting a mounted enemy on foot. We fight him in a battlefield that is essentially the last bastion of defense for the Ashina Castle, and we fight him. He is wielding this massive spear, halberd kind of cross. So a bit of information about Gyobu is he was initially a bandit chieftain, and he eventually ended up crossing swords with Lord Ishin, and obviously he was defeated by Lord Ishin. However, Lord Ishin noticed his combat prowess and made him the guard of the gate, which he takes very, very seriously. Like I said, his boss fight is in this massive kind of battlefield area, and it's essentially saying that so many people have tried to get through the gate, and Gyobu has killed them all, so he is extremely dangerous and an extremely skilled warrior. Definitely a highlight boss fight of the game. Here is Lady Butterfly. So she is the final boss in the flashback to the Hirata estate. She has 2 phases, I believe, and her main types of attacks are very fast attacks with her knives, as well as her illusion magic, which if you have snapping beans makes quick work of them. But she also is able to kind of make these illusion wires or ropes that she can stand on and kind of hide and then jump down on Wolf. What's interesting about her and the Great Shinobi Owl knew each other quite well, and she was obviously involved in some part in Wolf's training, because if you die to her, she says something along the lines of, "Oh, you're still a pup after all, I see." So obviously she knows Wolf, or at least has known him since Owl adopted him and brought him back to the Hirata estate. Here is a concept art of her back, and this is some of her knives. I believe these look kind of like a very elongated kunai. I'm not sure if this weapon actually has an official name. It probably does, but to me it kind of looks like a dagger equivalent of a kunai. A kunai is like a type of throwing knife that shinobi would use, and this is just kind of an elongated version of it. Here is some concept art of her kind of smoking a pipe, which goes unbelievably hard. Really, really cool. And she also trained in the Valley of Illusions and stuff, so which is just another bit of interesting lore, and is another area that we visit that we will talk about when we get to the location section. Okay, here is everyone's favorite or least favorite boss, depending on who you ask. This is the Guardian Ape. So he is one of the major bosses that we need to complete the game, and for some people, the hardest boss in the game. He is a very aggressive boss because, you know, he's a massive ape, and he has this sword stuck into his neck. The reason, or some of his lore, is that because he is kind of situated at the end pool for where all of the divine water from the divine springs has ended up, him drinking it has made him immortal. Or at least immortal in some form. I'll get to that in a few minutes. So that's why he's able to have this massive sword jammed into his neck. So someone before our wolf tried to kill him and obviously failed. And what's most well known for, or about the ape in terms of the community, is From Software pulls a very, very funny joke with this boss. So all of the bosses in Sekiro have little red dots under their name, or their health bar, sorry. This showcases how many stages they have. So when we first fight him, he only has one stage, which gives the impression of, oh, this should be a relatively easy boss fight in terms of there's only one stage. So after we defeat him, we jump on his back and use this massive sword to cut off his head. His body falls, his head goes rolling, and we get the message saying Shinobi Execution, which for Sekiro, that message only pops up when a fight has been finished. However, if you notice, even though this message pops up, the fog gate does not appear. Does not disappear. And then the ape starts to move again despite not having a head, and he picks up the sword that he used to cut his head off with in one hand, and he picks up his head in the other hand, and out from his neck sprouts a massive centipede. This centipede creature is what is causing his immortality. What's really, really cool about him as a boss is that the first phase he fights as an ape, or as an ape would. So at this point, he is still fully in control of himself. However, once the centipede takes control, he starts to walk on two legs and starts to use a sword. And his movements are very... what's the best term to describe it? His movements are very inhuman in terms of his swings, his style, his rhythms. So it's kind of cool that the centipede in him is almost trying to mimic human combat or human sword combat, but not quite getting it fully right. So it's just a bit more information on lore about the centipedes that keep people, and obviously animals in this case, immortal. So we defeat him by draining his health bar, or his stagger bar once again, and we jump on his back and we stab the centipede and we rip it out of his neck hole, and that finally puts him down, for now at least. We'll get into that later. Here is just another picture of the sword that we used to defeat him. And here is another bit of concept art of the ape from a different angle. Here is the great carp that we find in the Divine Realm. Not going to spend too much time on this guy. He's not really a boss per se, but we are able to defeat him to get a massive amount of scales, which we can use at the carp vendor to unlock some very powerful items. And he's a massive fish, which makes an underwater chase scene in the late game very, very tense. And if you have thalassophobia or anything, it is a nightmare. Here is the Corrupted Monk. So the Corrupted Monk we fight 2 times. One kind of in the mid-game as an illusion version of herself, and the second time at the entrance when we first arrive in the Divine Realm. She is almost guarding the gate, I forgot to mention she is a woman. So she, and just a cool little bit of information about both Sekiro and kind of this time period in Japan. She uses a weapon called a naginata, which is this weapon here. It's almost like it's not quite a spear, but it's like a spear version of a katana, which is the weapon that women samurai in this period in Japan were trained to use. So it's cool that she uses this kind of weapon. It just kind of makes it a bit more historically accurate. She is a fairly easy boss fight, especially at this point in the game where most players are very familiar and good at the combat. What makes her challenging is that she has 3 phases, which is brutal. There is a way to cheese her. I'm not going to say what it is because I don't recommend cheesing her. I would definitely say fight her, even though you might get your ass kicked a couple of times. It is definitely worth the fight because it is a really good fight. And again, she is also kept immortal by the same centipede type creature that we saw in the ape and that we see in the Senpo monks. So here are 2 enemies that we find at the end of the Divine Realm. So this is one of the standard dragon type enemies that we find in the start of the boss fight. They are not very challenging in terms of fighting them. However, they appear in great numbers. I believe there's about 15 that spawn at once, and dealing with them can be quite challenging just based on numbers. But once you defeat all of them, the Divine Dragon, which is this enemy here, who is a really cool design. As you can see, he looks like almost a typical Eastern Dragon design, kind of built into what looks like a kind of tree or floral design area. And he has this really cool sword with all of these different spikes coming out of it. And he is the enemy that we need for essentially all of the endings. We need his tears as one of the key items to finish the game. So we defeat him. Unfortunately, he is a gimmick boss. The way we defeat him is he shoots lightning at us, and then we deflect back at him. We do this about 6 times, and then we defeat him and end the boss fight. What's cool about him is that we do not actually kill him. Once we have defeated him, Wolf essentially runs up to his head, cuts under his eye with the Immortal Blade, and takes the tears that comes out. So technically he is still alive, which I think is cool, and I think it would have been a tragedy to kill such a interesting and majestic creature. As you can see, he is missing his left arm. So at some point he obviously did battle with someone or something and was seriously injured. So when we fight him, he is severely in a weakened state. Here is some more art of the Divine Dragon. Here is him from a different angle, again showing his very serpentine type of look. This type of dragon I actually prefer to the more Western dragons. They just look more cool and more mythical in my opinion. Here is some different concept art of him. This is his head. I don't know if you can see this, but this is his head. And then here we have Wolf for a size comparison. So this guy is huge. And here is him from the side. I think this one of his head close up is a really cool image. And then here is him doing a roar or a type of bite, and it just makes him look even more menacing when you look at him in the game, he kind of looks not weak and not inhostile, but kind of just very neutral, and is almost fighting just to defend himself, and shows a bit of swordsmanship by using a sword rather than his abilities as a dragon. Whereas here we see some of his full draconic nature come into the front, which is really, really cool. I really like how they did his mouth and his jaw, showing the kind of scale type teeth that he has. But yeah, let's move on. Sorry, I do apologize. I did not realize how zoomed in the camera was for the last few pages, so I hope this is a bit better. So here is some more pictures of the great shinobi Owl. So Owl is the shinobi who adopts Wolf. This happens in the starting cutscene of the game. Wolf is essentially an orphan child who is scavenging the battlefield for stuff to loot, and Owl finds him and essentially sees that Wolf is not afraid to die at all. So Owl takes him under his wing and trains him to become a shinobi. Now, you might think by this that Owl is a very honorable man. However, this could not be further from the truth. Owl is a schemer and a plotter, and is only after his own goals. He, in the ending of the Hirata estate, he kills Wolf after pretending to die and faking his own death. This is when Wolf is only saved by Kuro giving him his blood. Kuro does this seeing how essentially brave Wolf is, being the only one to actually come and rescue him from the assault. And essentially, even though Kuro wouldn't have died anyway, because he is immortal, still, under normal circumstances, Wolf essentially saved his life. And Kuro decided that this man is someone worthy of being my protector, and as such, he should get the blood because Wolf was dying. Owl has this massive sword. It technically is a katana, but it's almost like a katana with the width of a Western medieval greatsword, which is really cool. Owl is also huge, and I mean like absolutely massive. I believe he's the largest human character in the game, and we see him before our boss fight with him, standing next to Wolf, and Wolf maybe comes up to like his knee, which is hilarious. So one of the things that Owl tells Wolf is about something called the Iron Code. And the Iron Code essentially goes like this, that the first rule is to always obey your father. And the second rule is to always protect and obey your lord. So adherence to one's father overwrites your adherence and obedience and loyalty to one's lord. So he wants Wolf, when we talk to him, to forsake his loyalty to Kuro and help Owl essentially take Kuro by force. And what he says to Wolf is, don't forget the Iron Code. I am your father. You are meant to obey me. And we get our first, I believe it's our first choice for one of the endings, where we can either say yes and obey the Iron Code, and if we do this, we get the Shura ending, which essentially cuts the game's runtime in half, or we can choose to disobey the Iron Code and stay loyal to Kuro, which I believe is the main choice. And doing this starts our boss fight with Owl. Owl is an incredible enemy to fight. He is very skilled as a swordsman, but he is also a trickster and employs many types of tricks. He throws poison at you. He throws an item that makes it so that you can't heal. When you get him to a certain amount of health, he will fall to his knees and beg for his life. And if you fall for this, he immediately comes up. And if you don't have enough health at this point, can one-shot you. And yeah, very good fight. I believe that Owl is actually Miyazaki's favorite boss fight. Or favorite boss, because in an interview he said that his favorite boss is a trickster, and there's no other enemy really in the game that is a trickster except for Owl. Maybe Lady Butterfly, but those aren't tricks, those are more illusions. Owl's tricks are more like just kind of dishonorable fighting methods. So we ending up defeating Owl and killing him. And what is cool, or I think it's cool anyway, is that even though we tell Owl that we are not going to obey him anymore and that we ending up killing him, as he's dying, he essentially says, "That's my boy." So even despite Wolf's quote-unquote betrayal and his murder of Owl is still proud of him in the end, which I think is kind of touching. I mean, Owl's not a great person, to put it lightly. And there is also an alternate version of the Owl fight, which we can do by going back to the Hirata estate to unlock one of the endings. And in this fight, he is much harder, and he also has this spirit owl which follows him. The owl fight in the Hirata estate, in my opinion, is the hardest fight in the game. But again, it is so much fun. All of the bosses in Sekiro for me, despite how many times it takes, I have fun with all of them regardless. So let's move on. Sorry. So here are some more pictures of, so here is Owl. This is how we find him, except for the owl here. This is how we find him, or very similar to how we find him in the Hirata estate. He is leaning against a tree in a very similar position, looking very haggard and on the brink of death, and obviously he fakes his own death. Here we can kind of see the width of his weapon, and it's very jagged, as opposed to like a clean-cut katana. This is a version of Lord Ishin, which we fight if we choose to obey the Iron Code and stay loyal to Owl over Kuro. Here's some more artwork of Lord Ishin. So this is Lord Ishin at the end of the game. He is the final boss of the game, and in my opinion, the best final boss in any From Software game. So he dies right before the invasion of the Interior Ministry, which is probably what starts the Interior Ministry's assault, because they were essentially held back by Lord Ishin's combat prowess. But he comes back to life, or is essentially resurrected, due to Genichiro using the Immortal Blade on himself, and Lord Ishin kind of crawls out of his skin, which is a very gruesome scene. So Lord Ishin is back to his prime combat abilities. When we meet Ishin in the game, he is very, very old and is very sick. That's why he has Lord Emma in his employ. But this is him as he was during the initial war for the independence of Ashina, and as such he has the same combat prowess. So he has his sword, he also has a halberd weapon that he uses. This is kind of him from the back. Here's some more pictures of him, his face, both from the front and the side. He is missing his left eye, which I believe is due to a wound that he sustained during the fight for the independence of Ashina. And this is his firearm weapon, which is very, very funny. A lot of people think it's funny that he is known as the Sword Saint, except during his boss fight, I believe it's in the second phase, at random he can pull out just a gun and just shoot Wolf, and I believe the gun is like a one-hit kill. So just very, very funny. The gun itself is very ornate, and a very small detail, which I'm sure most people missed. I missed it on my first 5 playthroughs. The bench that Ishin is leaning on when we find him in one of the towers of Ashina Castle has the same ornamentation as the pistol does that he wields. So whether this is just From Software kind of reusing a texture asset, or whether the weapon and the bench were crafted by the same person, I'm not quite sure, but either way, it looks so, so cool. Even though it is a kind of semi-period accurate pistol or flintlock pistol, he's able to fire it like 2 or 3 times in a row, which is just even funnier. There's a joke on the internet that, you know, instead of him being the Sword Saint, he is the Glock Saint, which I just find so, so funny. So here is Lord Ishin again. This is him as we find him in the game and as we fight him in the Shura ending. So during the game, we can talk to Ishin for advice, for lore, and stuff like that. And also, if you're lost, he kind of gives you hints on where to go. He's located in kind of this secluded tower that's tucked away. And he's very sick, very frail, very gaunt due to his illness. You know, you can see his hands are discolored. But in the Shura ending, this is the version of Ishin that we fight. And while he is still very powerful and a very dangerous foe, he is a shadow of his former self at this point. Which is kind of, it's sad in a way to see, you know, this great, great warrior still, despite his age, despite his illness, fighting still to defeat Wolf, because Wolf is becoming Shura. We'll get to what Shura is a little bit later. This is the sword that Ishin uses in this boss fight. So this is the Demon of Hatred. So this is the sculptor who we find at the dilapidated temple, who turns into this massive creature because he himself becomes Shura. The sculptor is a former shinobi who had extreme, I don't know if the anger issues or if he just had a deep hatred in him. He even says during one of the dialogues that, you know, no matter how much he tries, every Buddha statue that he carves comes out as demonic. And Shura is essentially this tale of someone who becomes so engulfed in hate, they become engulfed in flames and almost become a literal demon, and tries to end the world, or at least end Ashina. So this is the sculptor after he has become Shura. Again, very difficult boss fight. This fight is actually completely optional. You do not have to fight him. However, I would strongly recommend that you fight him. He is another one of the boss fights that some people say is the hardest. A lot of the difficulty for the bosses in Sekiro depend on which type you struggle with more. If you struggle more with the kind of swordsman enemies, such as Gyobu or Genichiro or Lord Ishin, they will be harder. Or if you struggle with the more bestial enemies, like the Guardian Ape or the Demon of Hatred, they will be a lot harder for you. Personally, I find these guys to be a lot harder, just because I find that the attacks are a little bit harder to gauge, and the camera for this boss fight is not the best, but it is a very cool fight. As the fight continues, he gets more increasingly aggressive and has more flame attacks. However, something I forgot to mention at the Guardian Ape section is the woman who the sculptor was in love with was killed and eaten by the ape. And once you defeat the ape, you get a prosthetic tool called the finger whistle, which is one of the techniques that she used. And if you use this prosthetic during the fight with the Demon of Hatred, it stuns him for a few seconds. You can do this up to 3 times, and then it stops working. If you use it a 4th time, he essentially goes into his 3rd phase aggression at the very start. It's very similar to the Father Gascoigne fight with the music box. Same kind of thing. You use it, it kind of reminds him of his humanity and who he was before and who he lost, which is very sad. But yeah, and this is another enemy where once we defeat him, he actually thanks us because, you know, one of the things about the Demon in Hatred is he is in constant pain, like extreme agony. So we are essentially putting him out of his misery and letting him rest in peace. So he thanks us at the end of it, which is both cool and very sad. These 2 guys here are some of the standard Ashina samurai that we fight. Both the katana wielding types and the spear wielding types. Here is one of the designs for some of the general boss fights. These guys have actually, and same down here as well. I believe these are actually 3 different boss fights. I can't remember the names of each of them. But they are very cool fights. They're not the hardest, but it is cool actually just fighting a standard mortal samurai general. And yeah, some of them have a varied array of weapons. Some of them use katanas. Some of them are more aggressive. Some of them are more honorable. Some of them have spears. And yeah, the spear enemy, both for the generals and the samurai, if you use the Makiri counter, they essentially become a cakewalk and you can defeat them very easily. Here are some more enemies. So these are some of the slashing type enemies that we find. Very similar to the centipede boss that we fight. They have these kind of tri-claw type weapons that Shinobi actually did use in real life. Obviously, they were not half centipede monsters, but these guys flail like crazy when you fight them. And initially they're very challenging, but then once you get the rhythm down, which you probably do in your 2nd attempt, if not the 1st attempt, they are a piece of cake. These guys here are they start out as a boss, and then I believe later on they just become a standard enemy. These are shinobi hunters. So these men are specifically trained to hunt shinobi. That's why they wield this massive spear type weapon to kind of keep the shinobi at a distance. But again, if you have the Makiri counter, they are extremely easy. If you don't know, the Makiri counter is a technique that you can unlock where you can counter an enemy's thrusting attack by stomping down on the blade and causing them massive stagger damage. Up here is one of the enemies that we fight in Senpo Temple. They are extremely aggressive and they have this really cool weapon. It's like this this double-ended, I don't even know what I would call this. It's like a mixture of like a scythe and a hatchet, I would say. I'm probably wrong about that, but that's just the way it looks to me. And they have a hat that is very similar to the rats, which, seeing as both the rats and these guys, I can't remember their name for the life of me, are both tied to Senpo Temple, it kind of makes sense that, you know, their attire would be somewhat similar. Here we have the first, is it the first boss? Yes, it's the first boss that we fight in the Hirata Estate flashback. This is Juzo the Drunkard. He is essentially the leader of the pack of bandits that attacks the Hirata Estate. He is obviously a alcoholic due to his name, and he actually uses his sake. In the boss fight, he has this move where he pulls out this massive flagon of sake and drinks it and then spews it at you. But again, he has a huge, huge sword and is quite difficult due to being surrounded by lesser enemies. And there's actually an NPC that I can't remember his name that we can enlist to help us. And it's very difficult to keep him alive, but whenever I play, I always do my best to keep him alive. But yeah, cool enemy design. Very gives off that kind of disheveled mess of a man who's left to banditry despite his skill. So yeah. Okay, so here are some enemies that we find, or not just enemies, but NPCs and bosses that we find throughout our journey through Senpo Temple. So here is a woman, a very old woman, who has seemingly gone insane that we can talk to briefly. She gives us a hint about how to access a secret area. Here is another type of enemy that we find throughout the game. These are the enemies that act as the alarm bells for the stealth areas. They are very weak, they die in one hit, but if they spot you before anyone else spots you, they start banging on this pan, and these guys are a total pain to deal with. So this is a boss that is not quite a gimmick fight, but at the same time is not a standard fight either. He is the Armored Warrior. So he has traveled with his son from the west, as you can see from his knight armor and his western greatsword. So he is obviously a western knight. His son Robert was extremely ill, so he traveled to Ashina with his son in hopes to save him by giving him to the monks of the Senpo Temple, obviously not knowing the monks' true intentions. So he believes that he is guarding the bridge and protecting Robert. Since he is clad head to heel in plate mail, we can't actually kill him. We can take his stagger bar down, but we can't actually do any damage to him. So we fight him on a bridge with very flimsy wood panels on either side. And what happens is when you stagger him, you get the option to jump on him and kick him. So you have to try and stagger him in a position near one of the windows or one of the openings in the bridge. And you have to stagger him there and then walk around to the front or the side, whichever is the best position, jump on him and kick him off. And he falls to his death. And as he's falling, he screams, "Robert." So he's obviously, despite being a boss, he obviously seems like a very good man. He's here to save his son, and he's trying to keep us out to stop us from interfering with his son's quote-unquote treatment. Here are some of the enemies that we find throughout the game. So this is an enemy that we find in the underground section of Ashina. Here is one of the large type brute enemies. These guys are very damage spongy enemies, and they are very fat. They almost look like sumo wrestlers. They carry these massive mallets. I believe there's a Japanese snack or treat that is made by using a similar mallet. I can't remember what it's called. Here we have the Demon Bell, which we can find later on in Senpo Temple. This is something that you can ring, which increases the difficulty of the game, which is not recommended for your first go, but is definitely worthwhile doing later on. Here we have some more of the doctor type enemies that we find. These guys have a much more a cloaked design, and they have this little blowgun, so they shoot you and try and poison you. Here is another picture of some of the rats. As I said, the rats act as the spies for the Interior Ministry, and that's why they're called rats. And Lord Ishin is sneaking out of his hospital bed and is hunting these guys down, which is so funny that this old man who gives off this appearance of being so frail and so sick puts on a Tengu mask and then goes on essentially a massacre for these guys. I don't know why I find that so funny. Also, I apologize if I'm going through these last couple of pages very quickly. It's just my phone is at like 10%. So I gotta try and get through this quick. So this is the massive monster or creature made of what appears to be yarn, who transports us from the marriage casket, which we can find late in the game after obtaining one of the flowers, and he transports us to the divine realm. I'm actually not entirely sure what the lore on this guy is. I do apologize for that. But yeah, he's very cool, extremely massive, and is almost a very mythological looking creature or enemy type. So here we have the Senpo monks. So these are the monks that inhabit Senpo Temple, and while not all of them use swords, most of them use just martial arts, which is some of the techniques we can find. These include, punches, kicks, flying kicks, really cool moves. They're not the best for a wolf to use, even though he can unlock them, but for them, they are really good. Here is some more of the monks. These are them in the later stages of gaining quote-unquote immortality, and they have the same centipede creature that is this. The centipede is what grows in you if you partake of the divine waters. So I have mentioned this centipede a couple of times for the guardian ape and for the corrupted monk, but this is the first time we've actually seen an image of them. They are horrific and quite terrifying in their appearance, but I think that's kind of the point, just to show you how disgusting it would be to have one of these things inside your body. And as you can see, they are not small at all. So for, a normal man, if you look at this man here, despite him sitting down, this thing lives inside of him. So you can only imagine like the pain that this guy would be in having this thing wriggling around in his insides. But the monks see it as a way to gain immortality, so they are completely fine with it. Okay, moving on. Here we have some of the the 4 monkeys that we have to fight in the Divine Realm that gains us access to the Divine Child. These guys are quite an annoying boss, if I'm being honest. It's a cool concept, but it's not really the best fight. They're very gimmicky, you have to trick one by using sound, you have to trick one by using sight. There's one that you just have to rush down, and there's one that's actually invisible right behind you when you spawn into the location. So these guys here are called the Headless, and they are an enemy that we can encounter very early in the game, but they are not meant to be dealt with until much later. We need a lot of divine confetti. I believe there's 3 or 4 of them in them, and what makes them worth dealing with is there's an item multiple items that are different sugars which grant temporary stat boosts, like increased health regeneration speed, increased stamina regeneration speed, increased attack power, but these are consumables. However, every time we defeat a Headless, we gain the same ability as the sugar that we use, except one, it is more potent, and two, it is actually an art that we can unlock, which we can use infinitely, provided we have enough spirit emblems. So here are two different enemy types that we can find in the Fountainhead Palace area. This is the area that is located in the Divine Realm. So these guys here are the Palace Nobles. These guys are very weak, very frail, and not able to attack you, attack you and deal really any kind of damage. However, they are able to submit a spell on you, which drains all of your health and gives you the enfeebled status effect. Enfeebled means that you cannot walk. You can like barely move, but if you're enfeebled, you're essentially dead. And then they rush you and hit you with an extremely devastating attack. These women here are the Okami warriors. These are kind of the warriors of the Fountainhead Palace, whereas these guys are like the noble caste. Sorry, let me zoom out so you guys can see them. That's my bad, I apologize. This is what they look like here. So the Okami warriors, being all women, use the Naginata, which again is very historically accurate. Very dangerous enemies. They have extreme mobility. They dodge, they jump, they dance all over the place. And they are also able to cast lightning, which is a very dangerous status effect, except being able to, Wolf is able to parry it if you jump when the lightning hits you, and then you can reflect it back at them. There is a character mentioned in a lot of the lore, and she is called Lady Tomoe. She was a master of this lightning technique, and she was the one who has taught Lord Genichiro this technique. She was essentially his master when he was still in training. It is never actually specified, but it's insinuated that Lady Tomoe was an Okami warrior from the Divine Realm, based on they are the only enemies that can actually wield the lightning. They are also all female enemies, and Lady Tomoe, both being a female and someone who can wield the lightning and be skilled enough to be able to teach it, kind of hints that she came from the Divine Realm herself, which is very, very cool. I wish we actually got to meet or fight Lady Tomoe in some way. Not going to spend too much time on these guys. So here is the Blazing Bowl, everyone's favorite enemy type. Everyone's favorite boss. I jest. It's one of the most frustrating bosses in the game, despite being, fairly simple once you get the hang of it. It's just his moveset and his hitbox is crazy, so it makes it very challenging. These are some of the enemies that we can find in the dungeons. As you can see, they have very cruel-looking weapons and are very sick and elderly themselves. This is one of the enemy types. So this enemy is one that we find throughout the game. We can find them first off in the Hirata Estate flashback, and we find them more and more throughout the game. They are the Interior Ministry Ninjas. I believe that's what they're called. They may be the Interior Ministry Assassins or Shinobi, but they serve the same function. Extremely dangerous enemies, even late in the game. And when you first encounter them, they absolutely wipe the floor with you. However, for the most part, once you defeat them, they don't come back. So they're almost like mini-bosses, and they are so much fun to fight. Not at the beginning. At the beginning, they are quite frustrating. However, as you continue the game and get better at the combat, they are so much fun to fight, in my opinion at least. Here we have some of the inhabitants of the Mibu village. This is a village that had been tainted by the divine waters, so all of the villages kind of became, started like this cult-like behavior and all became obsessed with the waters. If you dive deep into the waters, you can actually find some slugs, and I believe it's meant to be that these slugs have drifted down from the divine realm. The way the divine waters work is they start at the Fountainhead Palace in the divine realm, and the kingdom of Ashina, the territory of Ashina, is located somewhere beneath, or at least in the same vicinity as the Fountainhead. So the water flows down and down and down and creates multiple rivers, lakes, ponds, and eventually stops where we find the divine ape. However, the guardian ape, not the divine ape, I apologize. But the Mibu village had their water supply tainted by the divine waters without them knowing. So they started to transform into these kind of half-human, half-fountainhead noble type creatures, which is why they look very pale and sickly, almost inhuman. Here is a boss that we find, and she is in my top 3 bosses in the game. This is a ghost type or a spectre type enemy called a Rin of the Waters. When we first find her, she is standing alone playing her instrument, and she asks us if we know where her husband is. And you have the option of saying, yes, we know where he is, or no, we don't know where he is. But either way, she gets angry and starts attacking us. She is not the hardest fight in the game, but she is not a pushover either, being a kind of spectre ghost type enemy. Divine confetti is very useful. She has this kind of long dagger that she uses, which is really cool. And I just find her character design, her appearance and all that really, really cool. And she has this kind of like basket covering her face. So I think the implication is that she was once beautiful, but then, given her name, Rin of the Waters, maybe she drank some of the water near the Mibu village and something happened to the top of her face, or she was injured in some other way, which is very, very tragic. And how even in death, she's still playing her instrument, waiting for her husband to come and find her. These guys here are just more of the standard Ashina samurai. These are more of the standard enemies that we fight out in the field, whereas these are the samurai, which are much more elite and much more skilled, that we find inside Ashina Castle itself. So these guys are much, much stronger, whereas these guys serve as the basic enemies of the game. Some of them have katanas and clubs, some of them have shields, and they all come in various states of clothing. This guy here has a little tanto on his belt. This is the chained ogre boss fight, and he is one of the first non-human enemies that we fight in the game, and for a lot of people is one of the hardest early game fights, just based on the area that we fight him in. We mainly fight him on a staircase, and this can affect some of the hitboxes. A lot of his moves are body slams, tackles, grabs, and kicks, which the elevation of the stairs can mean, even though you appear to be out of range, or kind of to the side of an attack, it will still connect. And his grab attack, if you are positioned incorrectly, can lead to him just chucking you off the side of the map and instantly killing you. So, very fun fight, but for a lot of new people who play the game, he is one of the hardest fights for the early game. Now, here is some of the final enemies that we fight in the game. These are actually the last enemies that we fight. These are the samurai and the soldiers of the Interior Ministry. So the Interior Ministry has been trying to retake Ashina for a while, and they were only kept at bay by Lord Ishin. But at this point, when they appear, Lord Ishin has already died. Thus, they begin their full-on frontal assault of Ashina. Not just the castle, but the entire territory as well. The Interior Ministry is essentially meant to be like the main Japanese government. If you remember that Ashina is its own independent state or independent kind of country and is not officially part of Japan at the start of the game due to Lord Ishin fighting for its independence, they want to take it back. So they come with a variety of enemy types. Here is the standard samurai type enemy. They dual wield katanas. They have a firearm on their back. I believe this is some kind of rifle. These guys here have kind of one short sword. I believe this is called a wakizashi. If I mispronounced that, I apologize. This is a kind of cannon that they have, but it's almost like a flamethrower. It's not flames per se. It's almost like a firework launcher, but they used to light the buildings on fire because the Japanese buildings at the time were made of essentially, very flammable materials like, thin wood and paper. They have this really cool looking, almost lacquered red armor, which is really, really cool. Which is really, really cool. The helmet that I actually own has a very similar look with the red lacquer on it, except instead of red, it is black. And there's loads more types of enemies that we find, There's the rat enemies that are now kitted up fully in the red armor. And there's the Interior Ministry Assassin, which are garbed in purple robes, which we covered a page ago. And then here is another boss for the Interior Ministry, very similar in design to the boss Juzo the Drunkard, except he is a Interior Ministry, or a servant of the Interior Ministry, but he is one of the captains. And despite his size, moves extremely fast. He does have blue robes in this picture. However, there's another version of him which he does have the red attire of the Interior Ministry. The Interior Ministry enemies are my favorite standard enemies in the game. Their appearance is amazing, their weapons, their armor, and they're just so much fun to fight. They're a very, not standard, but like they're the best of the best samurai enemy types that we fight in the game. So, this is a section dedicated to the shinobi prosthetics. So, this is a picture here of the shinobi prosthetic. The shinobi prosthetic was given to Wolf by the sculptor in the dilapidated temple. The sculptor had used it after losing his arm to Lord Ishin, but he gave it on to Wolf. Very cool, and it's really interesting seeing a take on what a prosthetic arm might look like in this time period. Here we see some of the concept arts and designs going into it on how the arm actually functions and is put together. Here is how some of the fingers move. Here's how some of the fingers and other abilities are attached to it. So all really, really cool. I adore this stuff. So here we have some of the prosthetics. So the main one here is the shuriken. The shuriken is probably the most basic of the prosthetic tools, but it's one of the ones you will unlock first, but it is by no means the weakest one, especially once you upgrade it further to the sapphire part. It is so good, especially for knocking enemies out of the air, such as Lady Butterfly. The shuriken is always in my quick bar for the prosthetic tool. Up next, we have some more concept art of the prosthetic in question. So this kind of shows how the different weapons are actually attached to it. So we can see here it is attached near the end of the bone part of the prosthetic. Another picture here shows it kind of how it reaches down just above the palm, so you have to kind of lift your wrist up. Very similar to the hidden blade for Assassin's Creed. Here we have the axe prosthetic. Very good. It's a very slow attack, but for dealing with enemies with shields or enemies that take a lot of stagger damage, this is very, very good. Here is the cannon tool that we use. It fires a little cannonball or a mini cannonball, dealing both impact and fire damage on enemies. Again, we have some more pictures and here of how it would work. Here's how it slots in and kind of its mechanisms and stuff. All of these kind of things I absolutely adore looking through an art book. So here is the umbrella shield tool. This essentially acts as a little shield that you can pop up to completely deflect an attack and negate any incoming damage. It is kind of cool. It's very situational. I personally am not the biggest fan of it. It's not bad by any means, don't get me wrong, but it is just not kind of for me. Here we have one of the prosthetics. I believe this is the reef prosthetic. And as you can see here, this is how it progresses as you upgrade it. So it starts off with just this little leaf, then a much larger leaf, and then a leaf that kind of looks more ethereal and stuff. This is meant to make enemies disappear when you use it, and you can use it to actually further an NPC's quest. There's a man who was left behind in Sempo Temple, and you can use this once it's fully upgraded to send him to the Divine Realm to kind of put him at peace. The man appears to be somewhat of a half-wit, but he is a very kind man and a very gentle and nice. So down here we have the Sabimaru prosthetic. This is a tanto, which is essentially a dagger version of a katana or wakizashi. However, this is a poison blade. So this is very good for enemies who are both weak to poison and also good at chipping away health. One hit from this starts the dots per second countdown that poison works with. So it's very good for hitting an enemy with this and then running away. For example, the snake eyes enemies are very, very weak to this. So next up, we have the spear. The spear is a very situational weapon. I personally, again, don't really use this. It's good for getting enemies at a range, but in my opinion, and it's also really good for enemies who are weak to thrust damage. But in my opinion, by the time you get close to an enemy, select this prosthetic and then use the prosthetic. In the time it takes to do all that, you can just close the distance and use your katana. So it's cool, it's a very nice idea, but in my opinion, it is not the best. Here is the finger whistle that I mentioned during the Guardian Ape and the Demon of Hatred. So just to for a quick little recap, this belonged to the woman that the sculptor was in love with, who was eaten by the ape, and once we defeat him, we get this, and then we can bring it back to the sculptor and essentially tell him what ended up happening, which is very, very sad. And that is the end of the prosthetic section. So we are now going to move on to the start of the environment section. One thing I just want to add, and this is just my personal take, so I'm interested to see what you guys think. I am not that big on using prosthetic tools in Sekiro. I only really use the shuriken, but that's really it, and even that is mostly situational, only for essentially Lady Butterfly. Most of my playthroughs, I actually don't even use it, but I have gone through and unlocked all upgrades for all versions of it through the New Game Plus. So with that out of the way, let us start on the environments. Okay, let's get started. Sorry. So, Sekiro. So this is the start of the environment portion of the art book. So we start off with this black and white picture of Kuro and Wolf. Wolf is kneeling. I do not know what this says here. If anyone does read Japanese, and I would like to know, I'll leave this up for a couple of seconds just so you can read it or take a screenshot. As I said, I am actually starting to learn how to read Japanese and also speak Japanese, but mainly read Japanese so that I can, understand all of these art books, because at least a solid third of my art books are Japanese books. Anyway, so we start off with this double spread here. This is a picture showing the battlefield that is shown in the introduction cutscene of the game. And yeah, you can see a watchtower here with a crow. This being a battlefield, there's loads of crows and other carrion birds flying around eating corpses. You guys might not be able to see it, but here is a man seemingly impaled on a pike. And yeah, also just before we continue, I'm not going to be spending as much time on most of the environments as I did with the characters. I'll just kind of be explaining the area, what's going on in it, and whereabouts in the game it is located. So we start off with a couple of pictures here. So these two pictures here, let me just move this, sorry, so you guys can see without the glare. So these two pictures on the top show the introductory cutscene of the game. So this is the samurai who is currently running for his life and stumbling upon someone killing one of his comrades in arms. This picture is also part of, or at least if not part of the cutscene, showing a scene or an art piece from the cutscene of the same man kind of crossing a river underneath these beautiful trees with a bright sunny day despite the brutal war going on. So here we have two pictures showing the same scene from different angles. This is also part of the introductory cutscene. So this smaller figure here, let me move this so you can see, sorry. This smaller figure here and here is Lord Ichin Ashina. And this larger figure here and here is General Tamura. So in the cutscene, these two have a one-on-one duel to the death. And despite Tamura's massive size and massive weapon, Ichin is able to dispatch him with ease, managing to block a massive thrust with his weapon, then countering by stabbing Tamura in the foot, and then as he kind of bends down, Ichin jumps on his back and plunges his katana into his neck. So based on the context of the fight, it appears that this was the final confrontation for the war for Ashina's independence, and with General Tamura being defeated, that kind of marked the end of the conflict and secured Ashina as an independent territory. Here we have some more pictures. This one is very dark, I do apologize, but it essentially shows Wolf as he is fully grown up. So this is him when Shinobi Owl is explaining the Iron Code, and right before Wolf meets Lord Kuro for the first time. This is another picture of the same cutscene. So we have Wolf on his knees, bowing in respect, and behind this door here is Lord Kuro. However, in this picture, the door is, or the window is not quite open. I'm not sure what the term is for these types of doors. Again, this is a very dark piece. Even looking at it, for me, it's very difficult to actually make out what is what. So here is this is the piece of paper that Lady Emma drops down into the hole where Wolf is essentially saying that Kuro is still alive and needs your help to escape. Here is another picture here. Very difficult to make out. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So here we have Lady Emma with her red umbrella heading towards the hole that Wolf was thrown into. Wolf at this point is essentially wanting to die. He's failed his master and no longer views his life as worth anything, and has just accepted his death based on his inability to protect his lord. But due to Lady Emma giving him this message, or this note, he gains purpose back. I do wish we got to see more of Lady Emma's umbrella, as I think it's really, really cool. Maybe having an umbrella type moveset or a deflection for her boss fight in the show ending, but that's just me kind of wishy-washy. So here we have some more pictures of Wolf. This is him kind of going through the stages of rescuing Kuro. I do apologize, I actually can't even make out what this picture is. If anyone does know, please let me know. This is the gate where we fight our very first boss in the game. He is not a tough boss at all. He's essentially just a regular enemy with slightly more health, but also has a health bar. He's essentially there to teach you the combat method in terms of the rhythm for parrying. And this is Wolf at the end of rescuing Kuro. And this is Wolf after receiving the letter, making his way out of the pit that he is currently in. I think the pit is it's both literal and symbolic. You know, he's in a pit of despair as well as being in a literal pit. So this is Wolf sneaking into the camp where he knows Kuro is being held. And this is him sneaking through some grass to go under this building. What's interesting is that one of the mechanics in Sekiro, in terms of getting specific endings and learning lore about both what's going on as well as the grander scope of the game, is you were able to listen in on conversations, and when you were under this building, you're able to overhear two Ashina soldiers speaking, and they're saying like, hey, shouldn't we like tie up or, you know, kill the shinobi that we threw in the hole? And the other guy essentially says no, he's, you know, accepted defeat and he's essentially living dead at this point. He's not even worth the effort or worth the rope to tie up. So they laugh and be like, oh yeah, that's true, not knowing that Wolf is literally directly underneath them, ready to attack. So this is the stronghold where Kuro is being kept. As you can see, it appears to be daytime in this picture, and there is a Amashina soldier here, probably standing guard to make sure that no one gets in. Sorry, I don't know why I paused there. So Wolf, being Wolf, sneaks around the back, mantles over some ledges, crawls and shimmies his way across some ledges, and comes in through this window where we see Kuro reading a book. I mentioned this in the character section about how Lord Genichiro doesn't actually want to force Kuro or, you know, harm him. And it's even more, it's even more evident here how Kuro is, you know, left with a window open, and then a 2-story building with no chains, no shackles, and plenty of reading material. So obviously Genichiro, you know, cares about Kuro to some point and is imprisoning him, yes, but at the same time doesn't want to be cruel to the boy. Again, another reason why Genichiro is my favorite character. So this is some of the tapestries that we can find inside of Ashina Castle. Not going to spend too much time on it, but they are very reminiscent of the traditional Japanese art style that was prevalent in this time period. So here is an amazing double spread. So this is after we have rescued our Lord Kuro, have made our way to the exit, and have blown the reed whistle to summon it's time to escape. To summon Kuro, and is also the signal to let him know it's time to escape. So we go through the door, and we make our way out into this field of white flowers or white wheat with a moon presence. A large moon showing here. Sorry, I saw a moon and immediately thought of moon presence based on Bloodborne. Anyway, so we have Wolf here on the right. Then we have Kuro to his left. And over here is Lord Genichiro. So this is where the first boss fight, like a real boss fight, ensues. And this is one of those boss fights that you are intended to lose. And for most players, Genichiro absolutely wipes the floor with you. Actually, let me just see what the next... Okay, yeah. What's interesting, though, is... so once you lose the fight normally, Genichiro cuts off Wolf's left arm. And that's the reason why he has the shinobi prosthetic. However, if you defeat Lord Genichiro in this fight, Wolf gets distracted by one of Genichiro's men running at Kuro, and during this moment of distraction, Genichiro still cuts Wolf's arm off. It's a little bit contrived, in my opinion, but it is interesting how either way Wolf does lose his arm. So here we have a double spread of the entirety of Ashina Castle. From the lower castles here, these buildings up here are kind of, actually, I think this building here is where Lord Ishin is, but at the very top we make our way up, and at the absolute top here is where Kuro and Genichiro are, and so is Lady Emma as well. And this is where we have our first boss fight with Genichiro, where we are not meant to lose. Fun fact, Genichiro is my favorite boss fight in the game. I often play Sekiro just to fight Genichiro, and then I'll stop playing the game. I adore fighting him. He is one of the best boss fights in the game. Once you know his moveset, he's very easy to defeat, but still, it's so much fun to me. Okay, so here is a picture of the dilapidated temple. So after Wolf loses his arm and Kuro's kidnapped and Wolf passes out, he wakes up here, where we first meet the sculptor. The sculptor has given Wolf the shinobi prosthetic and essentially tells him what happened, that Lord Kuro has been taken. And we then go on our way to begin the game properly. This is also where we first meet Lady Emma and Hanbei, who is the immortal swordsman that I mentioned in part 1, who kind of acts as a training NPC. Hanbei is very similar to Manji, in my opinion, from the Blade of the Immortal manga. If you have not read Blade of the Immortal, I would actually strongly recommend it, especially if you like Sekiro. It is so good, but I'll save manga talk for another video. So here we have the statues. These are essentially our bonfires or lanterns or whatever you would like to call them, sites of grace for Sekiro. They act as your rest point. You rest at them, you get all your health and your healing gourds back, but all of the enemies respawn. We see here a pendant that we get, a little shrine altar, and some of the buildings that we make our way over and through as we first get into the game. So this is Wolf after he has left the temple. This is him coming to a bridge which has been destroyed, leaving us to mantle and go around the outskirts of Ashina. This is also where we meet the memorial mob, which is an NPC which we can find throughout the game, and he sells various items from healing gourds to coin pouches to shinobi prosthetics and much more. Very interesting NPC. Sorry, I had the picture out of frame, but yeah, he essentially says, you know, wherever the dead are, the memorial mob follow. And you can see there's loads of crows and ravens around him. So this is Wolf here coming into... Actually, let me explain the bottom picture first. So this is a picture of a house that has been destroyed that we make our way through it as we play the game. This is one of the things, I believe actually our first shinobi prosthetic is in here. I believe this is where we get the shuriken, however I may be wrong. But this is where we find and fight our first boss. This boss is a general of the Ashina forces. He has 2 health bars, but is not the most difficult enemy. He's difficult at the start, but after a while you get the hang of it. What's cool about him, and a lot of bosses in Sekiro, is you are able to sneak around him. And if you manage to get a sneak or a stealth death blow or an aerial death blow on many of the bosses, regardless of their health, it instantly gets rid of one of their phases. Or sorry, their health phases. When I say phases, I don't mean like, you know, how some bosses in Dark Souls have, you know, the first phase and then phase 2, where each phase is completely different. That is the case for some of the bosses in Sekiro, such as the Guardian Ape. But for these kinds of bosses, it essentially just means you have to deplete their health bar twice. Here is a picture of another samurai boss, which we fight after defeating the Chained Ogre. As you can see, we have some, I believe these are sakura trees. I might be wrong about that. It's just the pink tone of the picture makes it look like that. This boss, again, is very similar to the one we just saw on the page beforehand. However, the difference is this guy is surrounded by soldiers. There's about 12 soldiers into 12 or 9 soldiers, I can't remember. A mixture of standard infantry, of more armored samurai, of some rifle enemies and of one of the pot bangers, which alerts all of the enemies in the area, including the boss. So the best strategy here is to kill all of the ads beforehand, and then once they are all dead, go and defeat the boss. And if you can, land a death blow on him. But if not, he's no big deal. Very similar moveset, if not the exact same moveset as the other samurai. So this is after we have defeated him. We jump down and we find this area here. This is kind of like a side area, and we see on this temple that there is a note stapled to it. And the note says, or the note essentially says that a bunch of soldiers went and tried to kill one of the headless enemies. However, they all died, and the surviving soldier wrote this note, and the quote that he says is, "Our spears and swords are useless. We cannot behead the headless." If you continue down this path, this is the area where we first encounter the headless, or our first headless enemy. At this stage in the game, there is no chance against him. So this is something that you have to kind of find and then take note of and come back at a later time once you are more powerful and have more health. And have more confetti, of course. So this is, as we make our way through the area, sorry, just want to make sure I didn't miss anything, where we are making our way through the Ashen outskirts, and we are trailed and stalked by a massive serpent. This serpent we encounter later. It's possible to kill him to get a very important item for one of the endings. But this is a stealth section where we have to stealth our way past the serpent, sneak past him, sneak under him, and all of that stuff. However, there is a little marriage casket here, which Wolf can hide in. Once you hide in here, the snake kind of notices you, and with one of his eyes, kind of slowly moves towards the crate. Once he is close enough, Wolf plunges his sword into the serpent's eye, sending the serpent into a pain and rage-induced frenzy. And at this point, you just have to abandon all stealth and run as fast as you can, because if you get hit by the serpent at this point, it is game over. Here is another Ashina settlement. As you can see, these settlements are not in the best of state. They are very dilapidated looking, kind of falling apart. Almost like the wood is rotted, and there's loads of crows and stuff flying around, showing that, you know, there's so many dead soldiers and horses and everything that the crows are eating extremely well. Here we have more pictures of Wolf moving through the Ashen outskirts. This is him kind of passing through a gate, and this looks like him making his way through the same fortification section that we just saw in the last page. Here are some pictures of some of the houses and buildings. As you can see, they are extremely worn down. Let me zoom in a little bit, sorry. Here is a watchtower that we can see. Again, it's kind of to scale, so you have the tower itself and then Wolf for a size comparison. Here's Wolf getting closer and closer to the Ashina castle. This is him making his way up the staircase, nearing the castle itself. And this is Wolf once he has dealt with all of the enemies in this area and has finally made it onto the rooftops of the surrounding buildings of the castle. So you have to make your way up through the buildings, kind of going from rooftop to rooftop, to then finally grapple up to the castle, where there are multiple types of enemies that are on the rooftops guarding it. There's one enemy which has become a meme, who's essentially floating on a parachute, and once he sees you, he like dive bombs you and screams at the top of his lungs. It's so funny, and especially the first time, because unless you know it's coming and or have the reflexes of a god, he will hit you 99% of the time. It is possible to deflect him, but it's very difficult even if you know that he's coming. So here, these are two very dark pictures. I actually can't even see what this bottom one is, but this is the interior of the Ashina Castle. I believe this is the room where we first enter the interior. As you can see, it's very neat. It's very typical of a feudal Japan era castle. And then here we have another tapestry picture of some of the art that we find inside of the castle. I adore this art style. I actually have a picture of a authentic Japanese piece like this in my sitting room of a samurai. I will put a picture of it somewhere here. Moving along. Here we have a picture of one of the lower floors of the Ashina Castle, with some bridges and walkways. We have the option of jumping down here, both now and later on in the game. Later on in the game, I believe that there is another version of the chained ogre down here, but patrolling these corridors are some of the Ashina elite samurai, which are essentially the noble caste of samurai for the Ashina Castle. So they're basically like the Ashina nobles. Wolf is here. I don't know if you can make him out, with another picture of a samurai picture that we can find. All of these types of pictures we can find as we explore the Ashina Castle. I know I've said this, but I just want to clarify. These pictures are extremely dark. Not all of them, but so far a lot of them have been. So it's not just that the camera is making them appear dark. They are extremely dark, even from me looking at them. So here is another picture of the Ashina interior. Here is what looks like an overhead map of the Ashina region, or at least most of it. So we have some of the outskirts here, and then we have the area leading up to the castle, and then here is an overhead picture of the castle itself. Some more tapestry art here. This picture is another area where we fight a boss. This is a boss that is essentially a souped up version of one of the Ashina samurai nobles. He attacks very, very fast and very, very hard. However, he goes down very quickly. So if you are able to deflect his attacks, he is a piece of cake. However, if you cannot, he will be very, very difficult. And again, some more tapestry art. Here's a picture of Wolf with some more banisters. What looks like to be a bit of the exterior of the Ashina Castle. However, it does look like it's maybe under the castle. I actually can't remember this area at all. And again, some more tapestry work here. Here we have another boss room. So we have some samurai armor here. And here is the room where Lord Ishin is currently being taken care of and resting. Let me move this closer. So we have Wolf on the left, and we have Lady Emma, who is tending to Lord Ishin, and then Lord Ishin laying down, receiving treatment and care from Emma. At this point, Ishin is a very, very old man, so Lady Emma is essentially his doctor, and as I mentioned in part 1, she is an extremely skilled healer. I wish these pictures weren't so dark. Oh my god. Again, another picture of one of the rooms. I believe this is the same picture of the room that we just mentioned, just from a different angle. This picture here, I don't know what this is. It looks like some kind of interior, but it's so dark, I can't even see. I don't know why they made this artwork so dark. I don't understand it, because even I can't see it. Here is some pictures of some of the armor that we find throughout the castle. This is some of the armor that we find throughout the castle that is put on display, but this is also some of the armor that the general enemies use, so it is kind of cool to see that they aren't just decorations, but that no, these are actually armor sets worn by the generals and the high-ranking officers of the Ashina military. So this is Wolf looking at 2 gravestones. These 2 gravestones, I believe, I'm not sure exactly. If I remember correctly, I believe this is the gravestone for both, I don't know which one is which, but for Lady Tomoe and for the previous Dragon's Heritage heir. So not Lord Kuro, but his predecessor, who was a close friend of Lord Ishin. So while Tomoe was one of Genichiro Sensei's, the other divine was a close friend of Lord Ishin. And what's interesting is Lord Ishin never tried to obtain the power of the Dragon's Heritage for himself the way Genichiro does. So I think that kind of just shows the difference between the 2 men. With Ishin being about just, martial prowess and wanting to, defend Ashina based on military might, whereas Genichiro wants any advantage, be it supernatural, regardless of its price and its cost on the body, especially his own body. This is a little temple that we can find outside of the castle. Not really that important, it's just a side area. It has like a little mini boss inside, as well as some items. I can't remember which items they are. I believe it's just consumables and money. So again, we have a picture of a moonlit night. We have some of the flowers here. Let me just look at the next page. Okay, so this is part of the Hirata estate. So this is where we first spawn in during the Hirata estate flashback, I believe. I know I am probably making quite a lot of mistakes. It's just because I genuinely cannot see. So here we have some of the buildings inside the Hirata estate. Some more here, a building here, a building here. There's like a little lake here. This looks like before the village got raided, as it looks quite tranquil and peaceful. The buildings, are still intact and aren't in flames, which is always a good sign. Here is where we here is where we fight an enemy or a boss called the Shinobi Hunter. We saw him and talked about him in the character part, but just for a quick recap, he is a very dangerous enemy who wields a long spear-type weapon, who is designed and trained specifically to hunt and kill shinobi. So it would make sense to bring one of these guys with you to attack a shinobi stronghold. Wolf defeats him. If you have the Makiri counter at this point, he's very easy. If not, he is quite challenging, but is very doable at the same time. Here we have some more pictures of the Hirata estate. This looks like the near the end, where we fight Juzo the drunkard. Juzo is not actually in this picture though. This is the lead up to the stairs, and past this gateway here is where we find the great shinobi owl, our father, who is leaned against a tree, seemingly mortally wounded, and tells Wolf to take the way around and then dies, quote unquote dies. This is a little hut / temple area where we can find one of the shinobi prosthetics. Again, another just scale comparison. So building and Wolf, as you can see, Wolf is essentially the same size as this building. It's a very small one. Here is the Hirata estate. This is the Hirata castle, as opposed to previously where we made our way essentially through the Hirata village. Still part of the estate, but this is the castle itself, and it is fully engulfed in flames. We have flames on the roof, flames inside the buildings, and making it almost impossible to pass. So that is why Wolf takes the way around. And as he's going through, it's never actually said, but it's insinuated that, you know, the closer Wolf gets to Kuro, the more panicked that he gets, which is completely understandable. Here's another picture of some of the fires going around the estate. We have Wolf here, kind of just looking at the fires. Some more pictures of the fires here. There appears to be some kind of body of water, this looks like. But yeah, at this point, the Hirata estate is beyond saving. So, I can barely see what this is. However, it appears to be the entrance to the underground tunnels underneath Ashina. This is where we have to go after we defeat Lord Genichiro, or at least one of the areas that we have to go through. I believe after defeating Genichiro, there's 3 areas we can go to, but this is the best one to go to first, in my opinion. Here are some pictures of the underground area. It's a very shabby, decrepit looking place, very musty, very moldy. This is where kind of twisted doctors perform all kinds of medical experiments on the Ashina citizens, or at least Ashina prisoners, doing all sorts of horrific, unspeakable things to them. So it is quite a scary area to go through. Here is another picture of the inside of the tunnel system. However, we do have a door here leading us out. This is an area that we can find leading up to the tunnels. And here is Wolf, after making his way through the tunnels, coming across a very flimsy and very thin-looking bridge. Here, again, is another picture of inside of the tombs and catacombs. There appears to be a barrel or a sack of something that has spilled out. It almost looks like money, but I'm not sure. I don't think it's actually money. This is a picture of a dead body. As you can see, it is extremely mutilated. So this is one of the victims of the torturers or doctors in the underground labyrinth of Ashina. I'm not sure if Lord Ishin and Lord Genichiro actually know what is going on beneath their castle, because I have a feeling that Ishin especially, being a very honorable man, would not agree to what is being taken place here. Maybe these guys have been ordered to do this by Genichiro without Ishin's knowledge, but it is interesting how these horrific things are going on right under the noses of all of the honorable samurai nobles. Here is a picture of some of the ways, the way out of the catacombs and tunnels. This is a picture of some of the crates that we can find in the tunnels. Some of them have animals in them, some of them have people in them, and this is just a picture of a man for scale. Okay, so we are starting the section on the Senpo Temple, where the monks reside. Before we go any further, again, I know I'm like a broken record. I do genuinely apologize for the darkness of the photos, of the videos. That is not my intent, and I can barely see them myself, so I am doing my best to kind of make sure that they are all visible as best as they can be, or if they're not as visible as best as they can be, at least I will try and describe them to the best of my ability. So let us continue. So here is another picture of some of the art that we can see in the temple. This is the outskirts of the temple grounds. As you can see, this area has a very orange and red color scheme, with a lot of the trees and a lot of the pinwheels that we find. Pinwheels have a very dark background behind them. Each red pinwheel is essentially a child that they kidnapped and who had died in their transformation, or their attempted transformation into the divine heir. However, there is one singular white pinwheel, and that marks, or that represents, the divine heir, who the monks succeeded in, despite her despising the monks. Here we have some more pictures of the temple. So we start off with this picture of Wolf kind of in the interior of some of the temple outskirt buildings. This one is Wolf walking up to a shrine-looking building in the temple. This one I cannot make out, it is too dark. But this one is kind of Wolf making his way further into the temple, kind of leaving the outskirts and finally entering the main temple complex. Speaking of, this is part of the temple complex. This is one of the main areas, as you can see. It is a walkway. It looks like that Wolf here has just jumped out of the floorboards, moving this one aside. There's various statues of, I believe these are Buddha statues, if not maybe famous Ashina warrior statues, or very high-ranking monks in the temple. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, this area is very, very creepy. Here we have an area where we first encounter a group of enemies. These enemies include standard monks, as well as some extremely deformed monks that are almost more centipede than man. Very frightening the first time you come across them. Here is the memorial mob that I mentioned earlier, except this is their location in Senpo Temple. And here is just some of the little decorations that we can find throughout the temple, which is really cool. I know these kind of decorations are ignored by most players, but I really like them. It just makes the place feel more lived in. Not just Senpo Temple, but most of the areas in FromSoft games as a whole, if not all of the areas. So here is a couple of pictures. So this is the bridge where we fight the armored warrior. We mentioned and talked about him in part 1. He is here to try and save his son Robert, and we kick him out of one of these windows in the bridge. So these are the windows that I was talking about, and he falls to his death. Here we have a picture of a waterfall coming down through, or as you get closer to the heart of the temple. I believe this is one that you can actually swim to the bottom. There's a bunch of item pickups, consumables, and I believe 1 or 2 lore items as well. Here's another picture of an amazing waterfall coming down from the temple. I really like this with the mist and everything. Sorry, let me zoom out a little bit. I apologize. Actually, no, let me zoom in. I apologize again. So here is a picture of Wolf looking out from one of the balconies of the temple. I believe this is actually the area where the demon bell is located. I might be wrong about that, but I think this is what it is. Here is Wolf after kind of exiting that building we just talked about with all of the infested monks. He is looking on at the trees, at the waterfall, and at one of the main temple buildings. So Wolf is cutting and sneaking his way into this temple. Here is another altar inside the temple. You can see Wolf is in a massive chamber here with all of these humongous pillars. We see a couple of things here, multiple different stages of serpent. This one looks like an egg. This one looks like it's kind of just hatched, whereas this one looks like a hatched baby. This is a picture here of Wolf looking on at a pyre. I can't remember the purpose of this pyre, but again, we have Wolf here for scale. Here is the one of the main areas in Senpon Temple. So I believe this is where we enter the fight to defeat the 4 monkeys. I might be wrong, but this is what this looks like to me. Let me hold it up so you guys can see. If I'm wrong, I'll come back to it and have a closer look, but I believe that's what it is. Actually, no, that is what it is. So this is the area we are teleported to, where we have to defeat the 4 monkeys who are acting as guardians for the little realm that the divine child is located in. So this is, like I said, a very tedious boss fight and a very huge arena. You have to fight them all in specific ways. You know, one of them you have to make it so he can't see. One of them you have to make it so he can't hear. One of them you have to make it... actually, you don't have to do anything really. You just have to rush him and cut him down. And then the other one is invisible, and he's actually right behind you when you spawn in. And it took me so long, like an embarrassingly long time to do this. So after we defeat the monkeys, we are then transported to this area. This is a very secluded area that is hidden from the monks, despite still being in the area of Senpon Temple. This is where the divine child is located, and she is very wary of visitors, and she is the one who gives Wolf the immortal blade. And at the time, she does not know that Wolf has the blood of the divine heir in him. So Wolf essentially says, like, hey, I need this blade. And she's like, if you touch it, you're gonna die. And Wolf is like, yeah, that's fine. And he grabs it and, dies. And the divine heir essentially just sighs and is like, oh, this idiot. And then Wolf gets back up and she's like, oh my god, you're part of the divine heir, aren't you? And kind of they go into a topic. She's a very sweet girl, very kind despite all the things that are done to her. And what's really cool is she gives Wolf rice throughout the game, which I used for one of the endings. but it is kind of very cute, just kind of coming back to this area and talking to this little girl. And she was like, "Oh, hi, Mr. Wolf, here's some rice that I made. I hope you enjoy it." It's just a very light-hearted moment in a very dark and disturbing location. This is us back. This is us inside the building with the divine heir. Oh, sorry, not the divine heir, the divine child. I should probably just clarify. So the divine heir is Kuro, the heir of the dragon's heritage. The divine child is the child that the monks of Senpo Temple created to kind of also have a similar ability, though not a relative or relation of Kuro or any of the dragon's heritage people. So we have Wolf here, the divine child here, and an altar up here. And again, like I said, this is where we obtain the mortal blade. Here's some more pictures of some art that we find. These are all different kinds of women in different attire. All really, really cool. I like this stuff a lot. So here is an interesting area. So here we have this massive pagoda. I believe there's an item inside here. I can't remember what it is. And then this is the demon bell. So the demon bell is accessed about a third of the way through the game. However, it is optional. And it's funny. There's a note next to it that says, "Under no circumstances do not ring this bell." And if you ring it, what happens is it makes the game significantly harder. So this is almost how to activate hard mode for your game. What is cool about it, and what I really like, is it's possible to get rid of the hard mode. So it's not like you ring it and your playthrough is ruined. If you ring it and then find that it is too difficult for you, you can use an item that it gives you to get rid of it. So you can kind of come back and use it and discard it as you please. I would not recommend using this on your first playthrough. This is something that is good for a second or third playthrough. So let us continue. Okay, moving on. So this looks like the start of a new area. However, it does appear that this picture is still taking place inside the Senpo Temple. Maybe this is the underground area, but I'm not sure. I'm just basing that assumption on all of the statues on which are littered throughout the temple. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that the book is always in frame. In part 1, there were some times where the book wasn't in frame, and now I'm super paranoid about having the book in frame while also having it close enough so you guys can see. So this is in one of the valleys. This is after we have defeated the Snake Eyes boss fight, and this is an area littered with monkeys, both normal monkeys and monkeys with rifles, which if there's anything cooler than a monkey, it's a monkey with a gun. And this is all leading up to the Guardian Ape fight. Here is some more pictures. This looks like the walkway that we go through to find the Snake Eyes boss. This is the bridge where we attempt to cross, where the serpent destroys the bridge, making us having to find another way around. And here is a statue that we can find hidden in kind of a tucked away little area, which has a snake skin, or a very young snake skin. So I'm assuming that this is the same serpent, but when it was very young. I forgot to mention in the earlier parts of the book, when I was talking about the area where we pass through the snake, or past under the snake. Leading up to that area, we find all of these massive shedded snake skins, and it's so cool and kind of is great environmental storytelling, essentially letting us know that, hey, there is something massive in this area. So here is some more art of the area where we fight the Snake Eyes enemies. These aren't, this isn't where we fight the Snake Eyes boss, but this is where we fight some of the Snake Eyes type soldiers. And then under here is the underground labyrinth where we enter to fight our final Snake Eyes enemy. What's cool about the Snake Eyes, both the bosses and the women, and the standard soldiers, is they're all women and are extremely accurate with their rifles. They don't fight with swords or knives. They do have some kind of martial arts moves, but they are all based on gunfire, and as you are making your way through here, you are constantly being sniped by them. The term Snake Eyes means, that they are extremely accurate, and if you have played this game, you know that you are essentially running for your life the entire area. This whole sequence is one of my favorites in the game. The Snake Eyes bosses are very weak to the Sarumaru, which is the poison blade prosthetic tool, or at least the first one is. The second one isn't, based on the location we find her in. I'm hoping we get a picture of that soon. So this is some more pictures leading up to the Snake Eyes boss fight and in and around that area. Here we can see the serpent. This is the first time we have actually seen the serpent. This does not do the serpent any justice. While it definitely looks like a very large snake, it does not show just how massive that this serpent is. And as we make our way through here, we have another section of fighting not fighting the serpent, but sneaking around him. And we eventually get past him by using a special type of ninjutsu, which can take over an enemy's mind. So we use this on a monkey, who then jumps across and starts screaming at the top of its lungs, which drives the serpent away from us and ends up killing our poor little monkey friend. May he rest in monkey paradise. So here we have some more pictures. We have some statues here. We have some pictures of some cliffs. This is very reminiscent of where we actually can have the option to fight the snake enemy. Here is Wolf coming up to one of the flowers. I believe this is one of the flowers that is needed for the main story, just based on how it looks here. However, I may be mistaken. Okay, so now we are officially past the main Snake Eyes enemy and are now in the Poison Swamp area. It would not be a Miyazaki game if there wasn't at least one poison swamp, and it's good to know that even feudal Japan has poison swamps. So poison swamps are not limited to any specific region. So here is the lower level of that same area. There's loads of trees that are very sickly, and more of the Snake Eyes enemy types, as well as our second boss. This boss is very similar to the first one. However, being in a poison swamp area, the Subaru prosthetic is not very useful against her. Because, she's essentially used to poison at this point, which is very understandable. Here is, where is this? Okay, this is after we exit the cave and are now on the path to the guardian ape. I'm assuming that's what this is, just based on these statues, which we find all over the place. We have a picture of Wolf down here, making his way up, as well as Wolf here, kind of taking in the vista. What is this? I can barely see what this is. Okay, so this is us making our way through the cave area. So we have Wolf down here. I don't know if you guys can see him. That's him there. And we have an enemy with his back turned. And I believe there's another enemy here. And this is where we use the ninjutsu. This is not the monkey I mentioned, but this is another enemy that we can use on just to draw the serpent's ire onto him rather than us. Some more pictures of some of the poison swamp area. This kind of looks like it's leading into Mibu Village, or maybe this is the Misty Valley area. I actually cannot tell. They look very similar, mainly just because the Misty Valley leads into Mibu Village. Up here is what I was talking about earlier. So this is some shredded snakeskin. This is obviously a lot smaller, so obviously the snakes shedded this once when it was very young. The snake is seemed as a deity to some of the inhabitants of this, especially those in this region of the area, which is very, very cool. If we don't see it soon, I will talk about something about the serpent, because it is interesting. So here is, I believe this is the house where we fight the Mist Noble. The Mist Noble is one of the Fountainhead nobles who is in this area, and it is the one causing all of the fog. He is a boss, but he dies in 2 normal hits or 1 death from above blow, which you can access very, very easily. This is another picture of Wolf approaching the same house, but just from a different angle. This is some more pictures of the valley and leading into the Mibu Village. I believe this is Mibu Village here. So since it doesn't seem that it's going to cover it since we've already moved on, I will just briefly describe our final battle with the serpent. So we get to a point, and this is completely optional, where you can go around the other sides of some areas, and you eventually come across this ledge with a fallen tree which you can walk over. And it is hanging over a massive, massive drop into a canyon filled with water below. And below this, there is a very jagged rock kind of peeking its way out of the water. The serpent is coiled around it, seemingly sleeping or resting. We are able to jump off this area and get a death blow on the serpent, in which we land on its head, putting our full weight and momentum of our fall into our katana's thrust, and we end up killing the serpent and getting its liver. The liver is a key item for one of the endings of the game. So, not optional, not needed for playing the game, but definitely worth your while doing. Even if you don't want that ending, it's still fun to finally kill that snake. So, pictures here of some huts and stuff. This does look like Mibu Village to me. I may be wrong, and if I am wrong, I apologize. It is just so hard to see these pictures. Okay, so this is us now in the Mibu Village. The Mibu Village, like I mentioned earlier, actually I didn't mention earlier, so the Mibu Village is an area that has been, or a village that has been contaminated by the everlasting waters, and this has turned the population into kind of these subhuman entities. not quite human, but they're not quite Fountainhead nobles. They're kind of like a mixture between them, and they are almost cult-like in their belief, kind of worshipping the water supply. So the water supply you can actually jump down into. And when you jump down into it, you see two things. You see loads of drowned bodies, which are either people who fell into the water and were drinking so much that they would not leave, or were sacrifices. And you also find these little slug enemies at the very bottom. So these appear to be some kind of creature that has washed down from the Fountainhead Palace in the Divine Realm, because in that massive lake you can find these guys as well, which is very, very cool. Some more art here of some of the village areas. Again, it is a village that has gone to hell completely. It's very difficult to make out exactly what this is, but there appears to be some kind of body here that Wolf is looking at. This is one of the gnarled trees with a picture of a man here, which for a size comparison. And then once we are done with Mibu Village, we make our way to this area where we find another of the key items that we need. And this is our gateway into the Divine Realm. So if we have gotten all of the key items needed up until this point, so the item that we find here and the flower that we find after defeating the Guardian Ape, we can make our way here and enter this marriage, kind of, I don't know what it's called. Oh, sorry, a marriage palanquin. And after we wait here, we see that the creature that seems to be have made of yarn, or almost like a handmade doll that we saw in part 1, comes and picks us up and transfers us to the Divine Realm. We can see his hand kind of peeking through here, which is very, very cool. And I can't remember if you see his hand at this point before you actually get inside the palanquin, but it's very foreboding in this area, because you look up, or at least in this picture, because it's like Wolf would look up and be like, what is that? This is our next section into the Divine Realm, where we fight the corrupted monk in her true form, and enter the Fountainhead Palace. The corrupted monk in her illusion form is fought near the end of Mibu Village, so she is kind of the boss for that area. I forgot to mention that earlier, I'm sorry. So here's a picture of this rope-like creature who at this point has Wolf in his hand and is walking him to the one of the entrances to the Divine Realm. Again, very creepy looking creature. Seems actually very harmless, I'm not gonna lie, but it definitely gives off very creepy vibes. It looks like something that someone would make up for like an SCP or a some kind of cryptid, I think, but maybe that's just me. So here we have our first entrance into the Divine Realm. This is before we reach the Fountainhead Palace. So here is the corrupted monk in her true form, and here is Wolf. This picture is cool just because it shows the size difference between him and the trees in this area. So as I mentioned in the in the character parts in part 1, the corrupted monk is a very challenging but fun boss fight. She has 3 phases, and she is, however, able to be cheesed, because what you can do is you can jump up onto these branches, and if you get behind her, you can jump down and land a death blow, and you can do this 3 times, which essentially ends the fight instantly. She is another enemy that has immortality, but based on having the centipede type enemies, type life forms inside of her, which I absolutely cannot stand the thought of. I know I said I wouldn't mention the cheese, but just seeing how it shows the area, I thought I might as well. So up here is a couple of really cool pictures. So this is the Fountainhead Palace, the main area of the Divine Realm. So this is Wolf here looking onwards. We see that there is a massive body of water here. This is where the divine waters originate, and you can see that they are flowing down, and they flow down into Ashina and eventually pool where the Guardian Ape is. So that's why, with Mibu Village being so close to this area, they got extremely contaminated. Here is some of the buildings that we can find in this area. And then here is Wolf making his way through some of the buildings. You have to take this area very stealthily because the Fountainhead nobles, while very weak, are able to set a spell on you, which causes you to become enfeebled, where you can't move, and then they run at you and kill you in one hit. So, very cool way of making an enemy that is extremely weak actually dangerous, which I think is really cool. A lot of games do not get that right. So here is us crossing one of the bridges. However, I'm not sure if it's this bridge or one of the bridges gets obliterated by the huge carp which we find in this area, and it is possible to kill him through a quest. So down here, this is Wolf kind of having passed the houses where the nobles live. This is now him entering the area where the Okami warriors reside, and they are very powerful. Throughout this entire area, there is one Okami warrior who essentially snipes you the entire time with lightning bolts, which can be very deadly, and it's very satisfying once we fight our way through all of their ranks and eventually kill them. They are fairly they're not hard enemies, but they're not difficult enemies, but they jump around, and their moveset is very fast and very erratic, so they make for a very fun fight, I think so at least. Here is some of the statues of some of the standard dragon enemies that we saw in part 1. Here is a picture. So this is another area of the nobles' households. Here is one of the areas that we get through after swimming our way through a chase scene where we are chased by the giant carp, and we eventually come up through this little hole here. Again, if you have thalassophobia, it is a nightmare. Here we just have a little house or building in the Okami warrior section. So we can see a man here for scale. And the Okami warriors tend to like to dance on the rooftops, so getting your way up there is kind of difficult, not because it's hard to get up there with your grappling hook, but if you're up there and like the Okami warriors on the building next to you see you, they'll just start chucking lightning at you. So quite annoying. Here is a great spread of the body of water in the Fountainhead. So we see how massive this is, seeming how that even some of the buildings here have been flooded. We have this massive sakura tree in the middle, and underneath this we find lots and lots of interesting things. We find buildings which have seemingly been submerged in the water. We find normal carps, we find the giant carps, and we find a headless. This headless is in my opinion anyway, the hardest non-boss enemy in the entire game, because you have to fight him completely underwater, and the underwater the underwater movement is bad at best and awful at worst, and the combat underwater is abysmal. So this is a guy that you almost want to come back and defeat right before you actually finish the game, once you are fully leveled up. Or at least that's what I did. So here is us making our way up. This is an area where we find an NPC who is a father of someone in Mibu village, and she essentially says that her father was taken there and has not been the same since. Actually, no, we don't find her in Mibu village. We find her later on in the Fountainhead Palace. I apologize for that. Anyway, her father has become essentially enslaved by the Great Carp. So he rings this bell, and we can ring this bell too, to summon the carp and give him food. The way we kill the Great Carp is we cannot fight him underwater. There is a way, and I cannot remember how exactly, but there is a way to get a poisonous bait item. The normal item is just called fish bait, which is essentially like fish food for him. But you can get poisonous bait, and that kills him. And he washes up in the area, or his body washes up in the area where the guardian ape is, just kind of showing that, you know, this whole body of water pools at that area, and even a creature as massive as that carp still ends up in that area. I believe there's an item you can get from, and I think it's a pretty powerful item, but I cannot remember. I apologize. This is us underwater, having to go through some of these buildings to avoid being attacked by the carp. So we have Wolf swimming. What is good, at least, about the underwater sections in Sekiro, as you guys know, underwater sections in video games are often terrible, but at least Wolf is able to move extremely fast and is able to hold his breath indefinitely due to a shinobi breathing method. So that's cool. If you had to come up for air and stuff, it would make this area from annoying to very, very tedious. Here's some more pictures of the underwater area. As you can see, there's loads of different buildings here which have been submerged, and they are all in different stages of disarray and kind of being turned back into part of the oceanic or the lakeside environment. You know, they're covered in barnacles and seaweed and stuff like that, which is very, very cool. I always like seeing man-made structures being reclaimed by nature in media. So this for me looks really, really cool. So here is after we get through the water section and pop up. We have a high-ranking Fountainhead noble. So all of the Fountainhead nobles are obviously nobles, you know, the nobility of this area. However, this enemy is like the highest ranking noble. So he's a bit harder to take down, but still quite simple. He does the same thing where he tries to enfeeble you, but seeing as you jump up right next to him, he's very hard for it to happen. The enfeeble spell essentially has no range limit. It's based on line of sight, so you can be on the other side of the map, but if one of them sees you, you still get enfeebled. Whereas you jump out of the water and you're like 5 feet away from this guy, so it's very easy to just assassinate him. Here is some more different pictures and tapestries that we find throughout the Fountainhead Palace and Divine Realm. really, really cool, as well as some of the different items and benches and stuff that we find in the houses here. So here is that same building that we just entered after defeating the noble. We go through this door here and start making our way up. Where are we making our way up to? We shall see. So, this is us going up to the next area. So we have cleared the Fountainhead Palace, and we are now making our way up to the entrance to the Divine Dragon's domain. So you can see Wolf is making his way up. Actually, one thing about this area is it's a massive staircase with a bunch of okami, which are fairly easy to deal with at this point. But what's cool about it is there's loads of lightning striking the ground all around you. It's not so much a case of you have to hide from the lightning, but it just adds to, like, you know, you're coming closer and closer to the divine, or to the heavens at least. So here is Wolf at the end of his journey to the Fountainhead Palace in the Divine Realm. So this is an altar which we pray to enter the Divine Dragon's domain. Here, I don't know if you can make it out, but there is a woman who is dead, who is essentially dead but still clinging on to the altar. There is a fan theory, and I don't know if this is true, and I don't know if I necessarily believe it. It's not canon, it's not official, it's just a theory. But some people speculate that this woman here is Lady Tomoe. She being an Okami warrior, she's the one who taught Genichiro the lightning arts. So it would make sense that she resided here, and since she died, people believe that this might be her. It would be cool if it was, but there's no real confirmation whether it is or is not, so it's kind of up to each player to decide. Here is an amazing double spread. So this is after we enter the Divine Dragon's domain, and this is Wolf facing down the Divine Dragon. So we have Wolf here with his sword and the immortal blade on his back, and the Divine Dragon coming out of his floral caked rock. He has his massive sword with all of these different kind of notches coming out of it, his missing arm, and his head and neck look a lot paler and a lot ghostlier compared to the rest of his body. He looks much more ethereal here, especially with his weapon. I really like the Divine Dragon. Not in terms of a boss fight. His boss fight is kind of ridiculously easy, but as a design for a character and a boss, I think he is so cool. So this is after we get this. So after we defeat the Divine Dragon, we don't kill him. We just take his tears, which is the final piece that we need. So after that, we head back to Ashina, and when we arrive, we see things are much different. When we arrive back, Lord Ishin has died, and since that, the Interior Ministry has begun its full-on assault on Ashina. So as you're making your way through, you encounter both the Ashina warriors and the Interior Minister samurai, as well as the Interior Minister shinobi, which are all over the rooftops. There's even one shinobi on a rooftop which has 2 dogs with him, which is just so funny that a shinobi essentially climbed up to like halfway up a pagoda while carrying 2 dogs. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I find that really funny. So here is Wolf on top of one of the higher buildings, looking down. So this is an area that we passed. This is the walkway that we made our way through to get up to the castle in the beginning of the game. However, as you can see, it is now up in flames because the Interior Ministry are here and they mean business. They are killing everyone and setting fire to everything. As I said in part 1, they have these kind of flamethrower firework launcher guns, which are really cool and is really, really effective at lighting these buildings on fire, especially if you know what Japanese buildings in this time period were constructed out of. So here we are making our way through. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention. So we get up to here. We enter the castle. We go to Kuro's room, and Lady Emma is tending to Lord Ishin, who has died and is laying on the floor. She also tells us that Lord Kuro escaped and that he has placed beacons on all of the rooftops to lead Wolf to him. So we say our goodbyes to Emma, we say our goodbyes to Ishin, and head on to find and rescue Lord Kuro. This is us creeping up. This is another enemy here, very similar to Juzo the Drunkard. We saw him in the final page of part 1. The captain, or one of the captains of the Interior Ministry. Fun fact, this is actually the same area where we fought our second samurai boss, or general. So if you remember, I said that there was a general fight who is in a courtyard, but he is surrounded by a bunch of standard enemies as well as a potbanger enemy. This is in the same area as that. So it is really cool backtracking through where we started from, and seeing how up in flames everything is, and essentially how this region or this state is done for now that Lord Ishin is dead. Here we continue our way through after defeating the captain. We find more and more of the areas that we have been through up in flames. Unfortunately, Inosuke and his mother do not survive. Inosuke being a blind man, and his mother being a blind old woman, both ended up perishing in the fire. It's never specified how, but I'm assuming that based on both of them being blind, as well as Inosuke being a samurai retainer to the Ashina clan, they would have killed him even if he was not blind. Here is a picture of the Demon of Hatred, which we talked about earlier. The Demon of Hatred spares no regard for who he kills, whether it's Ashina soldiers, Interior Ministry soldiers, does not matter. And all through our backtrack here, we find massive scorch marks and massive claw marks, and soldiers cowering in panic with burn marks and just terrified based on this thing coming in and wreaking havoc in their ranks. So Wolf is here, he spots the Demon of Hatred, and they are about to engage in battle. And that is the end of part 2 and the end of the book. So we covered all of the environment area, but we finish off with this great double spread of Wolf. This is Wolf atop the Ashina castle, where he is about to do battle with Lord Genichiro, which is a really cool picture and just shows how much Wolf has changed. I wish we got to see a picture of meeting Kuro and where we end up fighting Genichiro again, and then end up fighting Lord Ishin, because it's the same area that we start the game in. What's really cool, and is a very small detail if you look this up on YouTube, when we first fight Genichiro at the start of the game, Wolf, being a very out of practice shinobi, kind of fumbles his sword when he goes to draw it, whereas at the end of the game he draws it in one smooth motion, showing that how much he has changed. So everyone, that is the end of the Sekiro Shadows Die Twice official artworks book. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this book as much as I enjoyed making this video. Like I said in part 1, any excuse to talk about Sekiro, I will take any day of the week. And it is a blast covering this, being one of my favorite games of all time, and my second favorite From Software game. Bloodborne is my favorite, but in terms of combat, Sekiro is equal to none. So, thank you for watching. However, if you are listening to this video while trying to relax or go to sleep, this is the end of the video, so I would click off now in case an ad pops up and wakes you up. I'll give you a few seconds to do so. And yeah, so thank you again for watching. I'm not sure what the next art book is going to be. I'm not sure whether to do another From Software game or kind of take a break and do another game, but we shall see. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. This is Crimson signing off. Good evening.